Hi everyone, I am Vishala, founder of Jamati Culture and Creative Industries Network. Me and a couple of my friends from tourism, hospitality and IT community have started this community. Our intention is to bring together the tourism stakeholders and the destination developers and the culture community together so that we can make places more attractive, more vibrant and more inclusive. So we have started a placemaking series along with Placemaking India. This is our first attempt to bring this community together. And we have completed 3 sessions. We have covered, our first session was on the planning and our second session was on the storytelling. How do we bring the stories of places out and create more awareness among the community? And then we have covered the technology, and our fourth session, in fact the grand session today, is on the place led development. So we have excellent line of speakers and the moderator Pratima Manohar with us. And Pratima Manohar is an architect and a columnist, and she is founder of the Urban Vision. So I would let Pratima Manohar to introduce the topic and introduce our speakers to you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message on the live link, and the moderator will pick up the questions and ask our panelists. And thank you everyone for joining us, and good luck to all the speakers. Thank you so much. Pratima, over to you.
Thank you so much, Vishala. Welcome to everyone. We are here to discuss place-led development today, and this programming has been put together by Jamiti and Placemaking X India, which is a network of professionals who are interested in building better places. So welcome everybody. And in this session, we're going to talk about place-led development. And, the old mantra for successful real estate development was location, location, location. But today, with principles of placemaking, you can create that great sense of place and attractive public spaces where people can flock to. And in this session, we will be talking about that and, what makes great place. Why is it critical for any new infrastructure or real estate venture to have great public spaces and people at the heart of development? And we have, two amazing speakers today to talk to us about this important topic. We have Andrew, who's joining us from Sydney today. Andrew is the founding principal of leading Australian practice, which focuses on branding, marketing, and place visioning. And he's also the author of The Place Economy. And his consulting firm works closely with major asset owners, developers, and government to create landmark destinations. We also have Raghavendra Singh Bisson, who's the head of development at Blackstone, SPV's Nucleus Office Park. As many of you here in India know, Blackstone is currently the largest owner of office and commercial space in India. And we're really kind of excited to hear about what they are doing to make our public spaces and urban commons better. So just to set the context, we will have both our speakers present their initial thoughts on this topic, and following that, we will hopefully have an interactive Q&A session. And I'm going to request all of you to add your comments or questions in the comments part of the video that you're seeing, and we'll make sure Andrew and Raghavendra will answer some of your questions. Andrew, how have you been? Welcome to this session.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to you all, and I hope everyone is feeling that COVID is improving in India and people are getting to a safer place.
Yes, things are still really tough, but we hope things get better soon. So Andrew, should we pull up your presentation, and you can share your thoughts on what you think is place-led development?
Sure. Cool. So what I thought I'd do is start by giving you a little bit of background on the Place Economy, which is the book series that we've been creating. And that's a 3-book series. The 3rd one comes out next year. For us, it was really about creating a resource book for people in property development and place-led initiatives. We all see really bad examples of place making and development around the world. And this is about showcasing best practice so we can learn from people who are leaders in the sector. It does include quite a bit of our work too, but it's really less about us and more about looking at benchmarks of what lessons we can learn to ensure that we're creating compelling destinations for people. The interesting thing that is consistent with many of us who work in this field is that often it's driven by planning, architecture, and of course, feasibility, time and money. However, what's important is that we start to think about people first, because as users of these built environments, it's people that we need to engage to see value, to see that these places are being created with them in mind. So that does take a bit of innovation and forward thinking to understand what it is we're going to do to create these places that add value to people's lives, and then we can figure out what sort of built form our approaches to planning that actually ultimately will deliver these better developments, but also better suburbs and cities. The thing is that we've traditionally thought about this from a kind of planning or architectural point of view, when really we have to think about the market. Because when we actually focus on the end user, these people who are going to buy or lease or inhabit these places, we need to consider that by creating magnetic destinations, people will actually be attuned to thinking about them as their first choice. The reality is that most people have lots of choices in the market. And so if we actually think about creating these experiences directly at the very beginning, then when we finally do go to market, we'll actually have people lining up for it instead of going out and trying to drag them to us. So the way to do that, and even if we're talking about creating the highest possible financial outcome, we need to start by thinking more about the social impact that we have on the places that we're creating. If we think about what's missing, the first thing is really in this analysis. How do we create a sense of community? What can we do to bring people to a place? How do we ensure that they feel that there's a sense of health and well-being in these environments? How do we ensure that we're actually promoting these places and actually emphasizing their history, their attributes, their point of difference? We're making sure that they're inclusive and they're places that people really want to be. Because when we do that, what happens is it's easier to engage an audience. It's easier to attract people to want to buy, target tenant, or even, visit. And in doing that and actually creating a larger customer base, we're able to increase the rate per square meter or per foot that we're actually going to market to sell or lease. So ultimately, we're increasing the value of the asset. And in doing that, we're also creating customer loyalty because we have a product that people want. We're creating desirability. Now, regardless of your scale, albeit small or substantial, or even whether it's not funded by a developer, it might be actually initiated by government. Regardless, it still requires investment. You need to actually get people on board to see that what is being created will add value and therefore have a strong market and therefore create and deliver a return or actually meet its objectives. So it's very important we think about this from a strong economic point of view. And then ultimately, we need to get government on board to support the initiative, to actually remove the red tape and actually to sign off on approvals for these things to proceed. When we create these dynamic destinations that feel magnetic, that people want to be a part of, whether they're living there, working there, or visiting, if we do that really well, we create brand equity in the name of the place, in the purpose and meaning of the destination, and it increases our ability to market in a really cut-through manner. But also what it does is it actually creates this sense of satisfaction for people who work in the organization. So this idea of legacy isn't just legacy for the organization, it's legacy for all of you who actually work on these projects and what you say to your families, your partners, your children about the contribution that you're making to places of the future. But the legacy is obviously the place itself as well. And that means that it can't just be popular the moment it's launched. It needs to have a business plan built into it that can ensure that it lasts many decades to come. So our view is that if you start to think about this from a social point of view, in terms of what you can actually give, what you can offer, what you can actually ensure people see value in, then you will actually create economic benefit. You will actually create a product which is differentiated, more desirable, and therefore able to be sold at least at a higher rate per square metre. And then in doing that, the people involved in it actually see a sense of purpose. And I think one of the key things that's come out of COVID in the last year is purpose. So when you think about this notion of the values that we bring to life in these places, that's inherently part of an organisation as well. So what we do is we call our service place visioning, and it is very much a business plan as well as thinking about the urban realm, about what it is that we're creating, what makes this destinational. And so this applies to all forms of development, whether it's new builds or precincts or even, rejuvenation of existing assets. But the key thing that we need to be doing when we're thinking about this is always understanding who the end user is. Is it a resident? Is it a commercial office worker? What sort of business wants to be there? Because when we think about them at the very beginning, in the forefront of our planning and thinking, we will always create better solutions that engage them at the end of the day. And that is what makes a blueprint that we can actually build solutions from. And so if we think about this as a business plan for good business, we have to start by creating good places. And so good places understand that even if you're focused on residential, you still need to be very conscious about the economic foundations that surround and relate to that. And that means creating jobs, it means creating sort of livability and permeability. To create a destination means to create opportunity for reasons for people to want to be a part of this. And so when we have great ideas about what makes a compelling destination or a compelling magnetic place, it's always very easy to market because you have a point of difference, because you've thought about the end user, because you've got something compelling to say that is not like your competitor. So people actually have a really clear idea of why they would want to come there, visit there, live there, or work there. So we have to take a step back and stop just thinking about this as traditional property development, because these are different product typologies. In property development, most people are just replicating what they've always done. And that really does not mitigate risk. In fact, it creates risk. But in product development, understanding what are our audience's needs? How can we meet them? How do we differentiate ourselves and create competitive advantage? What are these spaces that we're trying to create that can actually bring character to life and actually that people will feel that this is the tribe that they belong to? And so it's very difficult to look at markets in a very macro way because they're not macro, they're quite micro, that every area is different to the next, every city is different to the next, let alone countries. So we need to understand what is happening in some of these spaces from a local point of view. What's actually happening with development, with public realm, what sort of investment is going into infrastructure, public transport, schools. And then how can we actually think about the benefits of these locations and bring them to life by adding value to some of the experiences that people want and look for, but don't currently exist in that location? So while we are all fixated on the notion of feasibility doesn't exist if we haven't thought about the core audience in the first place. So buyers and tenants, for example, we can't just look at a spreadsheet and a timeline and think that that's enough, because it isn't. If we're actually starting to be very clear about this business plan and understanding who our audience is, then we can actually rethink the way we structure a feasibility. So when we actually go through this process, it's always about constantly reminding ourselves to create meaningful user experiences. When we do that, it's so much easier to attract funding, to think about the way it can be leased and sold in terms of a stage or direct program, and to understand how these audiences will see the value of this as being a compelling destination. So the first thing we do is to understand what's missing. We've got to analyze what is already there and what is not there. Who are the people? Who are we trying to engage? And what are they looking for? And so if we can figure that out, we can actually uncover these hidden opportunities, and we can develop these solutions that are unique and unlike the other places that our audience might otherwise be going. But then we've got to tell the story. What's our narrative? What's the way that we can engage them? Now, I might come from a marketing background, and therefore it's assumed that branding and marketing might be the answer. But actually, that's just a way to illustrate it. The reality is that you need to make your purpose incredibly clear, have a point of difference, and tell a story that people feel is based on a sense of authenticity and truth. When you have a site, it's not about extracting every dollar from every square meter. It's about understanding, where can we add value? Where are there spaces that are not going to be well utilized? Where can we reposition the way that we think about our planning? Where can we ensure that there are spaces that are there for respite and calmness, or just an area to chill out? Where is there somewhere that might be a great playground for children? Where are these spaces that actually do not create any dollars for us at all? That they're not there to create value, they're not there to create revenue, they're there to create experiences. Because when we actually invest in experiences, the rest of the asset uplift actually achieves a better outcome for whoever's funding it. So therefore, we need to look at these opportunities with a different lens. And the traditional lens says, to avoid risk, do the same thing you've always done. But actually, that's upside down. It's not true at all. If you do the same thing you've always done, nobody cares. You're not engaging. You're not different. There's no reason for people to pay attention to you. The way to actually create opportunity is actually to think about all these things I've spoken about to ensure that you have something that people care about, that they want to be a part of. Only then will people actually line up. Will they look at you as being different to the other options that they have? And only then will they pay a premium. So for us, place visioning has to start at the very beginning before we get to the development fundamentals. And only then, later on, do we start to think about branding and marketing before we go into development and construction. So I'm going to give you a very quick case study about a project in Brisbane. And this is a laneway that certainly in India, you would be inclined to believe, why would you make a laneway a destination? And this laneway, not unlike the way you might be thinking about it, was a place that everyone just put their bins and rubbish and cars, and it was dirty. It was probably considered dangerous. It wasn't safe. It didn't have any good lighting. But there was a developer that owned a lot of assets on this laneway, and there was a view that, you know, he and we and others could create a real destination in an area that was otherwise a bit unloved. So if you look at the actual map of central Brisbane and the Brisbane River running straight through the city, you will see the orange line that is Fish Lane. So Fish Lane goes over 4 blocks of the city. It's not just a little laneway, as you'll see by that image. It's actually a fairly substantial laneway over 4 blocks of an entire city. So in 2014, this developer, Aria, worked with the city of Brisbane to think about how they could rezone this space. And this photo is not doing it justice to tell you how bad it was at the time. It was completely boring. There was nothing there, nothing happening. Nobody ever went there. And it was not a laneway that you would ever consider walking down. But now what's happened is we wanted to take advantage of the arts district down by the river and actually bring sort of some of the people who are going to all these galleries and spaces and waterfront locations and actually bring them back into the suburb. So we felt there was an opportunity to do something that was more indicative of, say, Melbourne or Sydney, a dining scene, a drinking scene, a kind of cultural scene. And so we needed to think about how could we turn a space into an area that was more dynamic, more urban, and more interesting. And so what we have now is we have all these buildings that have been repurposed on this laneway that have been changed into restaurants and bars and retailers, and in this case, a fitness centre. But we also have 40 massive murals down this laneway that actually make it feel artful and desirable. We've got beautiful landscaping. And so we actually have stories that actually permeate through this laneway so that there are constant experiences every step of the way. Now what we have is a street with a bunch of bars and restaurants. Some of them are very small, like this particular one. Other ones are much bigger and larger, accommodating more people. But what we have is a really interesting scene, and we have these spaces that traditionally were literally empty, that nobody wanted. And now we've got a destination. We've got these restaurants and substantial places that actually underpin the apartments up top. So this destination has meant that now about 1,000 apartments on the tops of all these buildings along this laneway have gone from being an undesirable location to the hotspot in all of Brisbane. And so by giving rent-free periods to all the retailers and the bars and the restaurants, that it literally becomes the marketing, the destination for why people would want to buy very expensive apartments upstairs above these buildings once developed. So the investment of giving something away to create a destination ground plane has enabled the developer to, turn that into many hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. In fact, I'd go to say over $1 billion in revenue because they invested in the ground plane. So you have all this art, these experiences, all this sort of different furniture and businesses. And now we have festivals and events and street parties. And so now this is a place that's become a brand, a destination. People come to Brisbane and they all want to go to Fish Lane. So as you can see, even by this sort of event and festival that's sort of spread out over to another street and the big mural on the side of somebody else's building, the developer ARIA Group isn't just doing these murals. And as I said, 40 to 45 massive murals that might be 6 or 7 stories high are actually on other people's buildings. Yet it's pretty much funded by one organisation. And now we have a town square centre under the railway line. It's very difficult to see in this photo because of the sort of rich growth and landscaping. But this is now an incredible destination in its own right, underneath a train line, which was otherwise a car park only up until 1 year ago. But what we have now is 3,000 plants, public seating, lighting installations, bands, musical performances, all surrounded by more bars and restaurants. So you start to get a sense of how this feels just off the laneway and why people sort of desire to see this as a really fun place to go. So what has happened over a 7-year period is that the developer has sold 2,000 apartments, and you can just assume that most of those apartments are probably anything from $600,000 to $1.5 million each. And in a market like Brisbane, where they had a bit of a tough time and capital growth actually decreased across the city, it decreased by about 10 to 15%. But in this location, it increased by 25%. So people were actually making a profit from on-selling their apartments, but everyone who retained their asset was getting great capital growth. And this was all entirely underpinned by the place-making vision to create Fish Lane a destination. Thank you. I'm not sure if anyone else can come on.
I'm here. Hi, Andrew. This was such a fascinating case study, and I loved when you said that good business builds good places, and that was a great example of how real estate values increased because of place visioning. Thank you so much for sharing that. And before we go into a detailed Q&A about that, I want to ask Raghavendra, and I know his colleague Tariq has also joined us, to share their case study of
Sure.
what they're doing in Mumbai in terms of place-led development. And I'm going to
Sure.
quickly pick up your presentation as well.
Sure. Thank you, Pratima. And thank you, Andrew, for a fantastic presentation. I think that's the story we are also trying to build here in Mumbai, and we hope 6 months to a year down the line, we'll be in a position to present a similar story, built. What we have today is an under development place-making project, which we all are very aspired to, shape up in next 2 to 3 months. What I'll be presenting today, along with my colleague Tariq, who leads the design for Nucleus Office Park, is an overview on evolution of commercial real estate space in India, right? What's the in Mumbai primarily, right? And what's the economic rationale of such place-led developments? In case private partners would like to partner with the government. And then we'll also touch upon the work in progress of Senapati Bapar Mark, how we are approaching, what challenges we are encountering. Right. So let me just begin this now. All right, let me start with one of my favorite quote, by Jen, who is again a passionate pacemaker. He say that first life, then spaces, then buildings. The other way around never works. So that set many thinking. Does that work? Not work? But in Mumbai, in some places we do have opportunity to build in this sequence. In many places we have to find new ways and means to build new places around it. So this is our presentation overview. We'll be talking about the evolution of business district in Mumbai, why some business district command better value, and what's economic rationale of venturing into such place-led developments, and then the case study of Sinapati Babat Marg. So Mumbai, let me just give an overview on Mumbai and commercial real estate development and how it evolved over the year. So it's not unlike many other cities in India. It started pretty early in 1918. In fact, in late 1800s, Balad State, which is one of the oldest CBD in Mumbai, start shaping up. By 1970, we have Nariman Point. Again, both places in the south of Mumbai taking, where they take shape. In mid 90s, late 90s, we saw the evolution of the Andheri Seeps project, which later changed to Andheri FTZ, right, which is on the western suburbs, and the evolution of Bandra Kurla complex and transformation of mill lanes in central Mumbai to central business districts. And post which there's a spurt of commercial development across Mumbai. Powai evolved. There are places in western suburbs of Mumbai which evolved. New Bombay, Thane. Um, the evolution of commercial development happened. So just to understand, there are six key micro markets, like Andrew mentioned in his presentation. It's important that you look at each micro market differently. What are the key strength opportunities for developing, transforming such micro markets. So we have the central business district, which is like the South Bombay, the Bandra Kurla complex, a comparatively new one, a transformation of central Mumbai, Worli, Parel into CBD. Then you have uh, the western and the central business districts, and then you have peripheral business districts. Each of them command different value and rentals, right? So BKC commands the highest around 250 to 280 rupees a square feet rental. South Bombay at one time was highest commanding, now it dips to 180, 200. Then after the Eastern Expressway project, it is now commanding around 200 to 250. Central Mumbai commands around 175 to 200, and similarly the suburbs command much lesser. So when you ask this question, why some CBDs command better rentals and valuation than others, the thing which comes in mind, are the areas, which really, like Andrew mentioned, in his presentation, change the valuation of the space, are public infrastructure and utilities, house urban planning. Are the streets or the roads equal for all, cars, pedestrians, cyclists? Do we have adequate parking spaces? Are there better social spaces, food outlets, social networking places, how is the connectivity and how safe is the neighborhood, right? And if you start rating them on these parameters, you'll see a good correlation, high correlation between the rentals they command vis-a-vis the score. And similarly, you see here different business districts command different rentals, So as a developer, if you have to, if you have, let's say, investment in certain CBDs, how would you change the value, So at times, probably you have to partner with the government and look for upscaling or upgrading the areas where you fall short. And the project which we're talking about, Sinapati Bapat Marg, is part of central Mumbai, Lower Parel area, where again there are some challenges on the local neighborhood, the social infrastructure, the public infrastructure. It gets flooded at times. So that's where we thought of partnering with the local municipal corporation and transforming the Sinapati Bapat Marg stretch, for around a mile. And what's the economic rationale behind this, for any developer per se, if he approaches? Just let's take an example of Lower Parel, which has an inventory of around 8.5 million square feet, and considering an average occupancy of around 80% and rental yield of 175 rupees a square feet, you still command a rental of around 100 crore per month, right? So as a community, as a developer community, if let's say all developers come together and adopt this stretch of 9 to 10 kilometers uh, within this Senapati Bapad mark of around 12 kilometers, what we are looking at is an investment of around 90 to 108 CR, right? And the returns, just in case, just if the increased occupancy of 5% and additional rental yield of 5% will give you a payback period of 6 to 7 months, besides the fact that the asset valuation will change forever for the lifetime, right? So that's a larger picture, of what economic rationale, it's extremely clear that, I mean, again, like Andrew mentioned in his presentation, by investing 5%, you can reap 110% benefits, So Senapati Bapad Marg, just for those who not from Mumbai, is a stretch of around 11.22 kilometers, which starts from Mahalakshmi Race Course, right? It is also the road which connects the South Bombay to the central suburbs. It has some mill-land development, some prime real estate spaces, commercial spaces. We have one of our two large assets on this stretch. We have another flower market here, public parks, public college, and then finally the Dharavi mangrove. It has a mix of commercial and residential space, for around in this stretch of 11.2 kilometers. And much of the concentration of commercial and retail spaces are in the stretch of 6 to 9 kilometers. This is Mahalakshmi Race Course, and this is Lake Dadar. We have two large assets on this stretch, around both heading up to around 3 million square feet, right? A little on Lower Parel and its history. Lower Parel is an old neighborhood, which started in 1815s with the cotton mills. There were different. I mean, it went through a great transformation. There was a textile mill strike. The mill then was sold to different landowners. And then some of the mill lands since 2000, early 2000s, got transformed into high street retail areas, commercial buildings, mix of residential as well, right? And now, in spite of all this transformation, I would tend to believe around 30 to 40% area is still being, you know, uh, acquired by the chawls and the old residents of mill workers. So from mills to it has High Street Phoenix here, which is a major retail destination. It has some of the marquee commercial residential projects. It also has some of the abandoned mills still, right? So about this project, One Green Mile and the streetscape development project, which we undertook, we took a total development of around 1.8 kilometers, making it a little over a mile, and we're calling it Green Mile. Phase one was primarily 800 meters, which initially started with a pavement improvement exercise, right, for us. So we approached the local municipal corporation, that we want to beautify the pavements and roads, just outside our plot boundary, and that's when the discussion, got the engagement of senior municipal officers, and then they said, why don't you adopt the complete stretch of 800 meters between two of your assets, and transform the whole stretch? Why to take it in piecemeal? And we got excited with this idea, got a team in place, right? So we took over this out of this 11.22 kilometers of SBM. We took over this 1.8 kilometers of development, and phase one is around 800 meters. The key project objectives which we set for the team to work on is reclaim the public spaces and give back to the community, because in the transition from the mills to the commercial mixed-use development, the local public spaces have been lost, to encroachments, to dead spaces. The second key objective was to decongest and improve traffic situation, which is extremely important for us as a developer and also for the community around. Third key direction was to have a equal street for all, for vehicles, pedestrians, and cyclists, and place making and activities for all, right? We also intend to create a world-class street, and besides the development, we'll also entail to maintain it for 3 to 5 years, right? The key objective, again, backed up by increase to 70% pedestrian walkway, uh, conversion of dead spaces under the flyover to around 9-10,000 square feet of usable public spaces, transplanting trees from 13 to 48 numbers of trees, right? We have uh, got a very competent team on this. In fact, Studio Pod was the one who initially came with this idea, and then which it grew into a larger idea. We got the best of the consultants on board. So Studio Pod is our design architect. We got MVRDB on board, who is a Netherlands-based international consultant. On they support helping us in this placemaking and the complete international design collaboration. We have a landscape consultant. Turner is a PMC. We have an art consultant, ST art, lighting consultant, and MEP consultant. So we thought we'll approach it in a very systematic manner, unlike public projects, where you don't get the competent team. Besides this, we have a large stakeholders in the government. We took approvals from around 12 to 15 departments, and that was one of the most tedious tasks of taking this project on board. So this is that stretch of 800-meter, which is phase one. We have two large assets here, one international center and one world center. And this is the stretch we're talking about. We have so this project is primarily divided into 9 sub-projects: east, west, east-west, and east-west of the 3 stretches, and the under flyover area. So these are some pictures of the existing. This is the first stretch. There's a continuous issue of drainage and system. The under flyover area are non-approachable dead spaces. The overall traffic issues, traffic encroachment on the street, and on the junction again, a lot of encroachment. I mean, if in this picture, if you see, there was encroachment under flyover by the public departments as well, right? So these were the key challenges, to remove the vehicular and traffic challenges. The key component of the street design we considered here, is to have equitable right of way, have an equal street for all, pedestrian friendly, have tastefully designed street furniture, shaded spaces for sitting, place making, place which gives an opportunity to place make, and celebration of local art and craft. So we divided this into 3 different thrust areas. First, to create street friendly for pedestrians, street friendly for cyclists, and street friendly, for the vehicular movement. We also took over the complete under flyover development and focused on it as an independent project, which gives us a great opportunity. We divided the whole under flyover area into multiple rooms, based on different column grids. So calling it a reading room, which is a local Vachanalaya, it has a strong significance in the lives of the local community here. Vachanalaya means the library or a public library. Then an amphitheater area for placemaking, to host events and all. Play area for the kids, the game room, for the elderlies or for corporate goers, and just a lounge room, for sitting. Again, took up designing of each of these spaces with a lot of thrust on activating each area, making sure each area gets used. Right. So these are some pictures, and then then connecting it with the overall streetscape development. These are some of the final pictures. Final rendering of the project. This is how we envisage the project to come out to be. Yeah. All right, and now, so we also have a good thrust on the street furniture, doing mock-up for all possible areas, for the street poles, the pavement areas. We also have a detailed program on artwork and sculpture. So Lower Parel, as we mentioned, it's a story of transformation, and contrasting transformation from cotton mills to corporate houses, mill workers to corporate staff, lower parade to upper world, the chawls to the high rises. So we're planning to depict this story and present in a more narrative and a story narrative form, using artwork on the flyover area. So capturing in the life of the local Mumbaikar in different forms and shape, right? Uh, and some of it has the mock-ups have been done. I mean, this is just one of the mock-up, on one of the column pillar. And we also have a program on sculptures. So identifying the areas where we can get the sculptures, connecting the local social program with the sculptures. These are some inspirational pictures, which we uh, took. Show depicting the story of transformation from a mill worker to a corporate goer. Then creating some places for people to come and socialize, right? And then creating a public park under the flyover, and then having one marquee sculpture to define the lower Parel. Let me just share some of the pictures of under development and the challenges we came across. So, extremely important for a project like this in a place like Mumbai where the traffic situation is bad. You barricade such development and the development so that there's no intervention from the locals, right? So we did the barricade. We did it meeting the international best practices. The challenges we came across, there was a lot of local miscreants. A lot of people who've been encroaching this place for many years. There was a resistance from them. At times, we have to take help from the local police. We also got set of our own guards installed in this stretch of 800 meters. The second big challenge was the underground utilities on which there's no proper documentation available. So at times we keep discovering them as we excavate the site. We also find some interesting ancient, drains and 60, 70 years old British era drains, right? So another big challenge was the vehicular encroachment because the locals have been parking on this place for 40 years. And in this picture, you can see the total street width is pretty much good for 6 to 7 lanes, but hardly 2 lanes were left for the traffic to move, and the other areas have been encroached, right? So these are some of the snapshots of the work in progress. We got the traffic encroachment cleared. This is how the widened road looks like now. This is work under progress. We got a dedicated cycling track, proper planter area. Right. These are some before and work in progress pictures. If you see the right of way here with these encroachments, and now with the widened road, you have these, and then you have a dedicated cycling track, a proper widened pavement areas. Yeah. So this again shows the before and after pictures. We're able to, reclaim some of the dead landscape spaces, into pavement areas and widening the footpath. This place see a traffic of around 1 lakh commuters every day accessing the local stations, right? So freeing up the junction. Junction has a lot of encroached structures. Freeing up those structures, creating place for. So this is that junction, and there was a public department um, structure which was then demolished with the help of the local MCGM. And we plan to free up this space into a good landscape junction. We're also going for green barricades, to camouflage the construction works. This is one picture of we got a green wall. What you see on the right picture is a barricade, and we're using these green barricades for the duration of construction. By the time the landscape works are done inside the area. One of the stretch we are working with the local MCGM departments, took their help converting these columns into green columns, right? And we'll be maintaining it. This is near the junction. This is how it was earlier, and It's a work in progress. Some of the areas where you can't have a social program, we're converting those into tastefully designed landscape spaces, which will be visible from the road. What you see on this picture is the barricade, which will be knocked once the area uh, gets the plantation done. Some social spaces under construction under the flyover. We're also using tactical urbanism for geometry correction. So there was a junction which has 7 lanes, out of which we reclaim 2 lanes. We'll be creating this for the public space because of the fact that where this traffic move exit, you just have 2 lanes. So there's no point having 7 lanes here. When you have 2 lanes here, 2 lanes here. So trying to give 3 to 4 lanes here and then reclaiming some spaces for the public space, also streamlining the traffic. Freeing up like vehicular encroachment, and this area will be used for a marquee sculpture here. Yeah, freeing up this area. Using tactical urbanism to not disrupt on one fine day, but slowly reclaiming the area, making it, reclaiming it for temporary usage and then making it permanent. So summing up, key learnings and we'd like to share with the team here. The first learning, is that it's important for such public projects to have the right set of patterns, right? So, because you have to sail through multiple departments, multiple stakeholders, important that you engage the right pattern who help you in streamlining the work, where the the department interface is required. So political will is important, who to approach, right set of stakeholders, understand the local stakeholders, their aspiration. Getting the right team is again important. Fortunately, we have a very good team here on this project. Constantly engaging with the stakeholder is again important thing. Mapping the site information is one key learning, because we generally do the site topographical survey and all, but mapping the complete existing public utilities, how you get information is also a challenge, but that's one important stake. Managing local relationship, extremely important for such projects. You can't create a project like this, without engaging the locals. So understanding their aspiration, their fears, supporting them, finding a win-win situation in such scenarios. Fourth thing which we realize is communication is extremely important because all stakeholders in such projects would like to be informed. So whether your own organization or the public stakeholders needs to be communicated. Fifth thing is important for the complete team to understand. You need a lot of patience and perseverance in developing such project. You move 2 step ahead, 1 step backward with local challenges, hindrances, but not to give up. You will have many who will say, "Ye nahi hoga, this will never happen." But important that team, the conviction of the team is extremely high on developing such, and then approaching this holistically as a place-led development and what it entails, as we learned, and Tariq edit the slide, and is to really understand the whole place-led development's needs. What are the local aspiration, what are the local constraints, physical constraint and psycho-political constraint. The how you elevate the whole place, right? We call it place-led development, right from the streets to the system, the public utility system, how you meet the aspirations of the local. Vaishnalaya is just one example. How you create social areas for their kids to play, fitness zones, right? And how do you celebrate the local history and culture and demonstrate it using artwork, sculptures, right? Uh, and then ultimately, after the completion of the project, how do you activate this space, right? So these are some key learnings from us. And before closing, I'll just read out one quote, which was also chatting with Pratima. Great public spaces are like your anchor tenant. You need them more than you need, more than they need you, right? So with this closing thought, I'll give the baton to Pratima, and we'll be happy to take any questions on this. Yeah, thank you,
I
Pratima.
think a lot of people who would have walked through that, really, it's like the new spine of Mumbai's new central business district. Whoever has used that space would be looking at this presentation with total glee. Raghavendra, because we can't wait to walk through those streets, because it's really like not made for people at the moment. It's more for cars and trucks. So we are very excited that you did
Right.
this. And I think it's, you both illustrated that there are powerful economic and social reasons to invest in walkability and public spaces. Andrew, I want to start with you. And I think all of us were blown away, to see that space come alive. It's so vibrant. It's the places we all want to hang out in, from being completely, what seemed like a dead alley space into like a vibrant destination. So it was lovely to see that transformation of this urban space. And like you said, it was not within the boundaries of that real estate developer's project. It was a larger urban regeneration program, in a way, and it made business sense, like you have very well kind of illustrated in your presentation. Can we speak a little bit about, what are the elements that made it happen? Was it the kind of strong will of the developer? What are the other kind of elements that led to this, space being created? And why isn't this a norm yet? Why can't we only have place-led development? Talk to us a little bit about that. Oh,
You? Yeah. Okay. The interesting thing about this opportunity was that most developers focus on their own piece of land. Now, it's all good and fine to have a plan around how you can use the space that you own. But I think what made this quite interesting was that the investment was on top of publicly owned land, so government-owned land, and dealing with government entities is incredibly difficult in any country, Australia included. And it's never one government entity. It's local government, it's roads, it's rail. I think there was like 5 different government entities. Now, as we all know with government, they don't talk to each other, they don't collaborate. And so it was incredibly difficult to have those conversations and get them to have some form of belief. The other thing was that while my client owned quite a few buildings on the surrounding area, there are many buildings he didn't own and couldn't buy. So it was about talking to those asset owners and getting them to believe in his vision. So it all starts with vision. You've got to have an idea that you can sell. You've got to have some sort of document that people can really get behind and support. And in this case, he did deals on other people's land where they didn't care about the laneway because that's where they stored all their bins. So he said, let me take over, I'll rent the space on like a 99-year deal and I'll find a better place for your bins. And so by getting access to all the parcels of land, he was able to find a way to bring the vision to life. But over 4 or 5 streets, he just did it 1 block at a time, just to prove the point to people. And it started with simple things like nicer ground plane, painting the concrete, doing artwork, doing murals, putting lighting all the way down the laneway. And it was all one piece at a time. And in doing that one piece, where he might own a building next door, he would go to market with those developments and sell off the plan, maybe, in each case about 250 apartments. And he did that repeatedly. And as he went further along, it became easier and he got more support because it became a destination. But I was just looking on my phone to kind of get a sense of what sort of value was created. And it would have been over $1.5 billion US. So, wow. A relatively smallish development. And for one individual privately owned developer, and actually quite a young person, by the way, then that's quite an impact for one little neighbourhood. But what's been great is that other places have been replicating that formula and that thinking, and they are looking to do these sorts of things in other parts of the same city as well as other cities itself. And the local government authority, being the Brisbane City Council, has now changed their view about the rules and restrictions, and they are trying to be more progressive about supporting developers and not working against them with different restrictions and caveats that make it near impossible or too risky to undertake these endeavours?
I think we are seeing, municipalities across India trying to do the same. In a way, it's public-private partnerships to improve the urban commons. And Raghavendra, tell us a little bit about that. What can governments do to, enable private sector developers more in these types of projects? Because I know the Mumbai city municipality actually has been, in the last few years, collaborating with developers. And I guess this is the learning stage for them also to come up with innovative policies. So, there can be a good collaboration to deliver better places. So, what else can they do to, really drive better places like the one that you
Yeah.
are attempting to create in Midtown, Bombay?
Yeah. So I think this was like one of pilot, so which started with a small intervention and then taking shape in a larger way. From 800 meters, we've gone to 1.8 kilometers now. So that's one such example, and as a to engage the private players, I think the only support we seek from the government is a single window kind of clearance, because when you have 14, 15 departments to collaborate, follow through, meet their expectations, their compliances, becomes extremely challenging. When you and in public space, you also have local challenges of traffic, locals coming and stopping the work and all that, right? So I think even if the government can provide one support in terms of helping single window clearance, that will be a huge support. And then whenever such interventions in terms of removing the encroachment or wherever the work gets stopped, they just step in, help it push, getting pushed, that will probably help. The third thing I think I would tend to believe is to map the utility infrastructure, completely, especially for the important streets, important areas, which is also not available. I mean, there's no digital copy available for that. We still have to look for the old blueprints, to figure out where are the drains going. So that's the third thing, which probably a development. Fourth important thing, which we are also trying to help the G South Ward, the G North Ward, is to create a toolkit, and lay down the approach, the design principle, the design controls. And once you have laid that down, they can reach out. So just for example, in this stretch, you have around 4 prominent developers present. We have Lodha, you have Phoenix Market City, right? We have Peninsula. So once you have a toolkit ready, it's a matter of reaching out to them and showing that this is what it costs per 100 meter, and this is what you can take up, and we are ready to support. You can follow this design guidelines so that the whole 10, 11 kilometers looks unified. And the same thing then can be adopted in different part of the city.
No, I think those are good points. I saw the list of utility companies that you had to work with to get this project kind of
Yeah.
underway, and
that was not
we worked on.
So,
Yeah.
so it was
And
a
in a place like Mumbai, where we work a lot too, we know that as soon as you start kind of digging the street infrastructure, there are really historic utilities there, and I guess that's the big challenging part. And if the city can give us data, it can really catalyze big change, because private sector seem to be really keen on participating in
absolutely.
this Better Cities program. Andrew, any thoughts on that? I know you've been to India, and I know you have like a hotel, which I love, in Bombay, the Soho House, which is a hub for creative entrepreneurs in India. And I know you've seen our streets, but from I know some of the cities that you work in are often on the list of the most livable cities in the world, and there's a lot of privately owned public spaces, private sector-driven public spaces. So, what advice would you give to cities like Mumbai or Bangalore who are kind of attempting to kind of build this revolution of better public spaces on what they can do to enable and really kind of unleash the private sector energy to build better streets and public spaces?
So I think one of the key things to focus on is that if you are a bureaucratic government organization, that commercial endeavors are not the enemy. And really, it's about creating economic prosperity. So, these public spaces have great potential to bring people together, to create opportunities for small businesses. And they are not just being seen as public spaces, but they're also being seen as a vehicle for developer profits. And they should be both. These spaces should be seen as destinations and experiences. And in many cases, the government have the opportunity to support developers and actually allow developers to fund these initiatives rather than governments paying for them themselves. And the reality is that a government will never invest the sort of money that a private developer does, because governments only see cost. They don't believe they see economic uplift. But the reality is they do. They see it in rates and taxes. They see it in all sorts of other fees. And when businesses are successful in that location or surrounding area, governments always ultimately see a benefit. What we need to do is actually be a little bit more collaborative between these entities, and rather than worrying about what the other entity is getting or receiving or what benefit they're achieving, actually look at what it is we're delivering to the general public as a service first and foremost. And then if people are going to profit from that, that's not a negative thing. People who are actually investing should actually see a financial return, because we want them to invest more money. We want them to make better places, and all of that costs and has funding implications. So rather than creating too many rules around it, actually just support a collaborative plan in terms of creating a destination that is going to add value for people.
I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about that. The business case for placemaking. Developers, architects, planners, they always dream of building great places that can be enjoyed and celebrated. But often, I know all of us have to live in spreadsheets where, important questions on bottom lines and profits are kind of discussed, right? Like Raghavendra, in this project, which is almost a kilometer long, right?
1.8 kilometers, yeah.
1.8 kilometers.
A little over a mile.
Yeah, and I know you gave us kind of the big numbers of how, improving the public realm here could increase your rental yield. And as someone being backed by Blackstone, which takes a very long view on these things, it really makes sense to really improve the quality of neighborhoods and, real estate yields in those neighborhoods. But can you talk to us a little bit about, what kind of investments will go into this place? Is government is the government doing any co-investment into this public space improvement? When do you see, returns coming in? And how has this impacted your kind of project costs? What is the percentage of this investment for public spaces outside your development in comparison to the development itself? Can you share those numbers?
Yeah, sure. Without getting into the numbers per se, but I'll give you some idea on the development. It costs you typically around 10 to 12 CR per 150 meter, depending on the challenges you have in terms of fixing the utilities, fixing the roads, changing the lights, bus stops. If you have a space like under flyover space, it will cost you more. If there's no space to be done under the flyover, it will cost you much lesser, right? So you can, if you're a private entity and planning to budget, you can safely budget around 7 to 10 CR per 100 meter to fix up the whole thing. Now it depends on completely the model you have engaged the local corporation with. What's the split you have agreed on? In this case, primarily we are taking up the cost on the complete development, getting support on only the sub-earth utilities, wherever it has to be fixed. But there can be multiple models which can be worked out, right? There can be different. For us, we approaching this project is primarily as a CSR project, right? To uplift the whole neighborhood, and if any better economic, I mean, asset valuation comes as a derivative, it's only a derivative of the whole development which we're planning to do around. Uh, but I think one important thing which we learned, is many times the developers don't approach also, right? So they think, I mean, it will be too much of a task. So we also, I mean, hope that post this project, that uh, that fear will go away, and while there are challenges, in meeting different departments, getting the approvals and all, but at the end of the day, it will be worth it, So I mean, if there are developers, in the session today, my request with them will be create a plan, hire a set of good consultant, invest a little cost in it, prepare a plan and go and approach your municipal corporation, right? In all probability, they'll say yes, right? In all probability, they'll say yes. Only question they'll ask, are you going to bear the cost? Will you maintain it for some time? And I mean, those are minuscule costs, vis-a-vis the kind of transformation or value add it can do to the whole development. Yeah. You're mute, Pratima, sorry.
When do you see the return on investment on this?
So we're not
Appearing on
calculating
your-
any ROI per se on this. For us, the best return would be if this project gets noticed, and the lower Parel as a place gets transformed and outshine the other CBDs, that's the biggest reward for us. Or it
Yeah.
becomes a case for other uh, other wards to follow, right? Mumbai has 24 wards, so yeah.
So India's law on, kind of encouraging businesses, actually mandating that businesses spend 1% of their profit on CSR really helps these kinds of programs. And I hope that corporates and developers start kind of utilizing them for improving the communities around them. We have a question from Harsh Prajapati, who's talking about considering the current situation when the government has to make health a priority. How do you approach the government to spend money on public spaces like this? And what do you do if governments, you know, don't end up investing in public realm? Andrew, are you
That's-
seeing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And look, the interesting thing is that right now is the time to be spending money because we have less people out in the public realm and on the street. So we should be taking advantage of that to improve and fix infrastructure and create these destinational experiences, because the reality is that once COVID calms down and when it eventually goes away in some form, well, what do we want? We actually want to bring people together. We actually want to create these fantastic dynamic places that people can actually, celebrate, commiserate, actually be a community. And the other thing that's really important is that our economies are all being devastated. Now, COVID is actually closing businesses. It's actually having an impact on revenue and economic output. And so once it starts to dissipate and we actually are able to come out onto the streets in the same volume again, we need businesses to survive. We need people out and about shopping, transacting, because all those small retailers, all those little food and beverage businesses, they need people, because without that, they will all go bankrupt. They will have no money. They need to support families. They need to pay rents. They've got overheads. These are often family-based businesses. We're not talking about big corporations. Not to say that big corporations aren't important too, because they are, when you think about the investment they put into cities and the amount of people they employ. So it's important that once it's safe to do so, that we actually have used this time in preparation to improve the quality of these spaces.
And we've seen that placemaking and better, more walkable streets, do increase retail activity. And I think one great example of that was New York City, which in the Broadway Greenlight project, where they, really pedestrianized, the center of the city, they saw retail sales go up by 49%. And these are these are the kind of foundation of your economy. These are the small businesses. So it's so important to invest in better public realm. I know we have a few more minutes left, but my last question to both of you is around, management and activation of these public spaces. One of my friends and colleagues from Placemaking X, Ethan Kent, often says that 90% of the success of a public space is management and programming of that public space. In a way, it's easier. I know it's really tough to think about it this way. It's easier to build that public space than to kind of really curate and manage it over the course of its lifetime. So, what can what can we do to program, manage, and activate those spaces? Raghavendra, do you have any plans on how to create that cultural networks and community networks which can bring that space come alive, make it safe, and maintain it? Do you have any plans for that?
Yeah, so we have started thinking on it. In fact, we spoke to Ethan as well, and got some brilliant ideas, on this. We completely agree, and one of the reasons we're maintaining it for 3 years is also to activate this space, and create it as a destination and not just a one-time fix. So we're planning to activate through community collaboration, the under flyover areas, the social spaces around that. We're planning to host, on weekends, some happy street kind of activities, in this place. We're also planning to engage our occupiers, and create agenda around bringing them together, and utilizing and activating these spaces. So there are not plans per se. It's still in execution modes, but we see this place becoming a destination, in a year's time.
Andrew, what about your advice for place-led developers on how to really institutionalize that place?
So, Ethan's good at understanding things like park benches and activation, and that's great. But there's actually a step before that that unfortunately is often forgotten. And that is around the edge of all these public spaces are shops. And in those shops, again, are small businesses. And what the worst thing that can happen is traditional leasing. And what that means is if you can afford the rent, you can have it. So what does that mean? We might end up with 10 kebab shops, 8 sushi shops, and 6 nail salons. It's not what we need. It has to start with analysis of what do people want in a place? What are the experiences, the restaurants, the bars, the services, the amenities? So the surrounding area of a public space needs to be curated. You need to get the right businesses selling the right product to the audience who you are attracting. And then with the activation, it's about understanding different times of day, meaning mums with prams at 10 a.m. or, people doing exercise at 6 a.m. or people having lunch or kids finishing at school at 3 o'clock or adults knocking off work and want to go for a drink at 6 p.m., whatever that might be. What are the different times of day? What are the different days of the week? You have to actually do a calendar of activities, not just, every Saturday night, but actually every 2 or 3 hours a day, every day of the week, meeting the needs of different audiences. That's really important, and that's what proper management delivers.
And what about the institutional structure for that? Do you recommend that, it's community-led? How do you kind of incubate those organizations that manage these spaces?
It has to be economic because you shouldn't be asking people to work for free. Everyone deserves a wage, right? And so if people deserve a wage and people need to act professionally and do a good job, then it needs to be funded. Now, you can ask local government to fund it, and sometimes they do. You're better off if you've got the best solution is one big developer who is seeing economic uplift because of increased rates per square metre in their commercial office or their residential or their retail and F&B. So they will see direct benefit in creating a destinational experience for the general public, and therefore they first and foremost should fund it. But if it's a whole host of different asset owners, then it's about potentially extracting small amounts of money from people to create a fund or a pool of money to actually, ensure that this is ongoing. Because what's really important to remember is this is not a one-off thing. You need to fund this not for the next year, forever. And the only way to fund anything and maintain it forever is to create a financial, viable, economic solution that ensures that people are continuing to profit, so there's enough money in the pool to continue to invest. And you can't do that when you're relying on a community group.
I think business improvement districts are a good model. And Raghavendra, I know a lot of your investee companies, as well as you, have so many assets on that particular stretch. And if everybody kind of incubated and supported an organization to, to kind of bring the community alive there, think about programming as well as upkeep, that would really kind of keep this project alive for the life cycle of it.
You just need one success story, So, and the developers in Mumbai have a herd mentality. So once you have something set, there'll be a follow through.
Yeah. This has been such a fascinating conversation. And, Andrew, I loved some of the things you said about the magnetic destinations and how great businesses build great places. And Raghavendra, I really can't wait for this pandemic to end and for us to kind of walk through some of those amazing spaces that you're creating. And I think it has such a great potential to, in a way, catalyze change for better. And I know in Mumbai, we are seeing a lot of developers now starting to invest in better public realm. This is amazing. And I want to thank both of you for spending this hour with us and sharing your valuable inputs. And I want to thank all of you, the audience, for spending this hour with us. And if you have any further questions for us, please leave a note below and we'll share it with Andrew and Raghavendra as well. And good luck with all the great work that both of you are doing. And thanks again to everyone for joining this. And I want to thank Jamiti and Placemaking X India for hosting this important conversation. Thank you so much.